I get it. Superannuation is confusing. It's a world that's filled with fancy-pantsy terms and acronyms that most of us don't understand. But of course, superannuation is your wages in retirement, so you need to take an active approach to your superannuation. But how do you do that when you don't understand it? So over the next series of videos, I'm going to go through and explain all those acronyms and terms in everyday language so that you get a better understanding and you can make informed decisions about your superannuation. So in this first video, I'm going to talk about the 3 different types of superannuation that's available to you. So there's one that everybody knows about, and that's your industry funds. And they're the ones that most Australians have their superannuation invested in. Then we have what's called a platform superannuation, and the final one is a self-managed superannuation fund. So let's go back to our industry funds. As I said, it's the one that most people are invested in, and it is where most people's super guarantee or the superannuation that your employer pays for you is invested. So it's a cheaper alternative for most people. It's a no fuss, no hands-on approach to superannuation. You've seen the ads, compare the pair, which one should you be in? And it is difficult, I get it. But you do need to make sure you're in a fund that is working actively for you and giving you the best benefit that you can get. The government recently issued about, I think it was 13 funds that they said were underperforming or their fees were too high. So just because you're in an industry fund doesn't mean that your money is being looked after as best it could be. So it's up to you as an individual to have a look at the performance of your fund, look at what fees you're paying, and of course, make the move if you need to. So what is an industry fund? Well, it's a fund manager that collects funds on behalf of the superannuant or the person whose super it is. They invest on your behalf and they manage your money on your behalf. They pay the tax to the tax office that you need to pay, and they will manage your payments when you retire. You have no visibility over what they're investing in or how they're investing. All you see is this is what your fund is worth, this is what percentage it's grown by, what your fees are. That's the level of your visibility. And for some people, that's fine. So what a fund manager does in a industry fund is they collect everybody's money and then they go and invest it. So they have a lot of money to invest and can get you quite good returns. You pay them a management fee. Most funds, that will be a percentage of what your fund is worth. And then there's generally a monthly administration fee and some other charges. Inside an industry fund, you can get insurance for income protection, life insurance, and all those sorts of things. And it generally will be a good low-cost option. Depending on how long you want that insurance policy, you need to be very careful because some of those will only be 2 years. So you need to understand what you're signing up for. Have you taken a policy out that will cover you to the age of 60 or the age of 65? Or is it just a 2-year policy? Don't tick a box and think you're covered. Remember, knowledge is power, and it's up to you to understand what you're ticking and what you're signing up for. The downsides of an industry fund is that you don't have any visibility of where they're investing and what they're doing and how they're spending money. Some of those industry funds have spent an exorbitant amount of your money on sponsoring tennis tournaments or golf tournaments or football teams or advertising. Now, their argument is that that's how they get people to know about their fund, so therefore they get more money. I don't know whether that's the case or not, but you don't know what they're spending. And that's the downside of an industry fund. There can always be liquidity issues. So if a certain group retire all at one age group, for example, there potentially can be some liquidity issues with industry funds because obviously they've got to sell down assets and if the market's down and things like that. So there's some positives and some negatives, like all three funds that we'll talk about. Now, the next one is a platform. Now, a platform is sort of halfway between a industry fund and a self-managed super fund or an SMSF. What that does is it's your money, it's invested on a platform where you buy and sell and it manages it for you. You have the ability in a managed or a retail fund to be able to invest in certain assets that you want to invest in. So you have that whole visibility and control, and it is just your money sitting there. It's not grouped in with anybody else's money. So in a retail fund, you will generally have somebody managing it for you, and that's where a financial advisor comes into play. So you put your money in, the platform that you're investing in will take the tax out and do all the compliance stuff with the tax office that needs to be done. But you get to invest in whatever shares you want to invest in or whatever managed funds you want to invest in, as long as that platform allows you to buy those type of shares. There is some limits to what you can invest in on a platform, and that's the downside of it. You will pay the platform a fee, again, like the industry fund, based on a percentage of what you have invested. There will also be monthly charges and administration fees. So it's certainly a cost-benefit analysis needs to be done to see whether that platform is the right type of superannuation for you to have, or whether you're better off to be in an industry fund. But again, that's the beauty of a financial advisor. They can look at those things. And it sometimes comes into play that if you want to have control, let's say you're interested in the share market, a platform super will give you that without the responsibilities of an SMSF. So then you can have a bit of a play, invest your shares or your money into the shares that you want to invest in, or the investments that you want to invest in, rather than an industry fund where you're just told what investments you get. There's some downsides, and that is, there's not necessarily as much diversification, or, your eggs quite often can be in one basket, as they say. Whereas an industry fund, because they've got so much money that they're investing, they will have it spread across a lot of different types of investments. So you're not quite so as exposed in an industry fund as you possibly can be in a retail fund. But when you go to a retail fund and you take control of your investments, or your financial advisor helps you with where to invest, it is important that you do spread your risk, or you do have that diversification, so that if one market drops, you've got a counterbalance in another market. The third and final type of superannuation funds is what we call SMSF, or self-managed superannuation funds. So that's the last step, and it's very much like a retail fund or a platform fund, in that it's your fund. You have control over your money. You have to do everything though. So with an SMSF, it's up to you to make sure that you have your investment strategy in place, that you have paid your taxes to the tax office for the contributions that fund's received. The tax return is completed and lodged on time. The fund is audited. If you've got property, that you've done a valuation of those property, and you've done all the rules and regulations. SMSF, you really can't do on your own. You do need an advisor. So that's a financial advisor to look at your investing, and an accountant to organise the tax returns and the audit of the super fund. The consequences of getting a SMSF wrong are quite significant. Your fund can be made non-complying, which means that it can no longer accept any more contributions until it is made complying. Sometimes that can't even happen, and you have to start a new fund. The tax office can also charge you penalties instead of the capped low tax rate of a super fund, you can sometimes have to pay more in tax because it's become non-complying. So there's a few things that you need to be aware of before you decide to start an SMSF. And you need to have an active involvement in it. It's not a set and forget like it is in an industry fund. So why would you want an SMSF over, a platform? Well, in a platform superannuation or in an industry fund, you can't have property. So you can't say to your industry fund, I want to buy a house down the road and have that as an investment property inside my super. You can't have business real property. So quite often businesses will own their premises and they will rent it to the business. And there's lots of things, if you want to buy investments that the platform super doesn't allow you to buy, you will need to form an SMSF. So there's some ups and downs or pros and cons to all three of those. If you want to know more, jump on over to our website and we've got a list of pros and cons. Of course, if you still have more questions, reach out to us here at 123 Financial Group and we'll be more than happy to look at what those three different types of superannuation investments look like for you and make an individual assessment as to whether you should be in an industry fund, a platform fund, or an SMSF. I do want to point out here though that over the years I've heard lots of places ringing people and saying, create an SMSF, we're going to build this property, you'll get a return of 10%, we'll guarantee your rent. They forget to tell you the cost of running an SMSF. So you will need an accountant, you will need to have it audited, and there are costs. It's not as simple as you may think. And the other strategy that you've got to look at is if you're buying a residential property inside an SMSF, there are some rules of what happens. It can't be your own property. You can't have other people, you can't live in it. It's got to be, commercial rent and things like that. So you need to be very careful. But one of the other things that I see with people that buy residential property inside an SMSF is what happens when you retire? Has the loan been paid out so that you're actually generating an income from that rental property? Because you've got to remember your superannuation needs to give you money in retirement. It's no point having a residential property inside a self-managed super that the rent is only covering the mortgage payments and the cost of holding that property, because then what is left over for you? So there's a lot of things in play when it comes to an SMSF, and it really is something you need to step into very cautiously and with a lot of knowledge behind you before you make that decision to start an SMSF. So again, reach out to us here. Our financial advisors and our accountants can chat to you about what is best for you.